Could I have something to eat?
No.
Could I have something to eat?
No.
Could I have something to eat?
No.
Can't you say anything else but no?
Try asking again.
Can I have something to eat?
No.
How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another Wizard101 Pack review, the video where I spam on the unpack so you guys don't have to. And today we are going to be going over the most recent pack that was just dropped within test realm, now entering live realm, the Ravenwood Rangers Lore Pack. And yes, because it's a lore pack, we have new spells, which is the biggest thing that this pack has to offer. If not, in my opinion, probably the best thing this pack has to offer. But to be completely fair, we're still going to be going over the aesthetics of this pack. We're also going to be going over the gear, show some gear comparisons. Is it going to be good for PvP? Is it going to be good for PvE? Is it a decent replacement for something? That's all that we're going to get into within this pack review based on the 10k opening. And afterwards, we'll be giving from a score of 1 to 5. So without further ado, let's get started with today's pack review. So in terms of the aesthetics, we have the Adventurous set, and honestly, the one thing that I will say is I gave this pack a lot of flack in terms of the aesthetics, but it's actually not as bad as I think it is. I feel like the only thing that ruins like the whole aesthetic for the pack, in my opinion, are the boots. I feel like the boots ruin the whole set, in my personal opinion. Now, if anyone can actually make a really good stitch with these boots specifically, then you can be considered the god of stitching, because I cannot see any other way you can actually make a stitch with these boots without it looking too silly or just completely awful, because these boots absolutely suck aesthetically for sure. However, I will say the hat's kind of clean, you know, the robe's really clean. I do like the added attention to detail here. We have the Ravenwood insignia almost everywhere, from the pet scarf right here to the Ravenwood insignia on the hat, Ravenwood insignia on the robe. Even the compass has that same thing. And by the way, the compass is probably my most favorite part of the pack's aesthetic. The pet itself is also very adorable. All these pets are fairly similar, with the difference being their eye color along with their scarf color. And I think the pets are absolutely adorable. And as you can see from the patch on the side, you have Wizard101, or as in 101, you know, basically hinting Wizard101. So it looks really cool. The second set that we'll be looking here is the Able Rangers, and this one I really do like personally, because I really do like the pink scarf. This is probably the closest we'll get to a pink scarf in terms of boys gear, with the exception of the alpine gear. And this goes with a very similar setup, the pet as well being different scarf color and also different eye color as well. As you can see for the compass, a different lightish blue tint right there, or like a darker blue tint, and you still see the added attention to detail with the Ravenwood insignia. And finally, the last set, which I didn't actually get the robe for, sadly, after so much openings, we have the Interpret set. And like I said, you know, a little bit of a different little glass tint on the compass there for more of a darker gray color, kind of like a black color. And with the pet, you can see that it has a different color on the scarf along with different color on the eyes. Absolutely adorable. But me personally, in terms of aesthetics, this is not my most favorite pack. However, I can't say it's the worst of the worst, because there are some good things about it. I could probably see maybe the robe go pretty well in some stitches. The hat's pretty clean. The compass is definitely a really good thing. It's probably my most favorite part of the aesthetics, and obviously the pets are adorable, so I can't really say much about the pets. Now, I wanted to keep this video fairly short in terms of going over the pack itself, because in all honesty, there really isn't that much in this pack that will be worth going for. So now let's actually get into comparing the stats and gear here. So if we're gonna go down from the Adventurous set, because we're going to showcase all the stats that this pack tends to give, except for the robot and Turpins. Here's the stats for the hat, here are the stats for the robes, here are the stats for the boots, and finally here are the stats for the wands. If we go from the Able set here, we have the stats for the hat, we have the stats for the robe, we have the stats for the boots, and finally, we have the stats for the wand specifically. And finally, let's go for the one that we're actually going to be doing comparisons in. And for the Interpret set, here are the stats for the hat. We do not have the robe, but it will be very similar to the Adventurous set, except this time will be with Myth and Life stats. And then we have the stats for the boots specifically. And we also did get the wand, so here are the stats for the wand as well. Now, what exactly do I think about this pack in terms of stats? Well, it's really not that great. If we were to compare this with Savannah's, for example, which is usually my main comparison for any of this stuff, because I think that the Safari gear is pretty decent Dragoon's replacement gear. And there's also a new set of gear that is actually slightly better than Savannah's, if not better than Savannah's overall, that will be really good for a Dragoon's replacement if you don't happen to have Dragoons. And that will be the Autoist set that we'll be comparing in just a minute. But as you can see the comparisons here, keep in mind that there is a 10 level difference, so chances are is that everything that is fairly neck and neck will probably be really close, or this set will already overtake the Interpret set that we have here. Same thing goes for the boots here. The boots are pretty much the similar story, and pretty much, again, keep in mind, 10 level difference. However, the Savannah set is already better overall for many reasons. The only advantage that the Interpret set has over Savannah's is the add-on to Resist, which is actually really awesome. However, now, if we were to compare it to what I think is the best PvE gear that is a replacement for Dragoons, for those who don't happen to have Dragoons just yet, we're comparing to the Autoist. As you can see, for the Autoist, more health, you already have power pip chance, which is the biggest game changer, the same amount of resist, which is really good, same amount of, like, you know, crit, same amount of damage, but Autoist also has more shadow rating, making these boots way better for PvE compared to Interprets by a long shot. And finally, if we were to compare the hat itself, well, as you can see, more health, more power per chance. This one's universal pierce, which is actually really good. You're just going to be losing one pierce for myth, but that's not really that big of a deal. But for life, this is already likely going to be better overall anyway. And as you can see for crit, same damage, but the shadow rating, another big game changer, is on the edge for Autoist. Autoist wins in that category, making Autoist, in my opinion, the better overall PvE set of Dragoon's replacement. So finally, if we were to compare the wands themselves, as you can see by the base stats, this already beats it in the pip conversion department, crit department, and really keep in mind this is 10 level difference, so chances are these will probably be fairly similar, if not the exact same, or maybe even better. But the biggest thing that the Fossil Hunter one has over the Interpret one is the adjustments. So with Fossil Hunters, if you combine the pet that goes with it, the Frillosaur, with the wand, you already get a major stat boost compared to what the Interprets will be, or any of the Ravenwood Rangers gear. This pack is really more of an aesthetic pack rather than it is a pack that you want for PvP or PvE, if we're not talking about the spells specifically. The biggest grab that this pack has is the spells and spells only. So now let's talk about the spell elements, which is probably the best thing that comes from this pack. The first thing we're going to be looking at is Splash Watch, which does 430 to 490 damage. It's very close to damage with Ninja Piglets, which does 420 to 510 damage. And if you were to upgrade this at tier 2, you finally have a slightly stronger version of Ninja Piglets at base form. And honestly, I will say, for this spell, it's actually really interesting because you could probably go either path in my personal opinion. My opinion, however, is that going the damage path might be better for Myth Wizards, mainly because you'll have a hit that is guaranteed to do a decent amount of damage and is fairly cheap. If you were to go the bottom path, my only issue with it being that the utility is going to be an extremely conditional thing. The only time you will probably be able to use this fairly effectively would be against Nova players who tend to like to use Feint, or any player who likes to use Feint. The other scenario you could probably use the bottom path is against Fire Wizards. However, me personally, I don't think it's really good for Fire Wizards, and the reason why is because the way fuel and spells that have some sort of fuel element works is they give 3 of them. And with that, you still have to deal with 1 of them. And you can spam this spell pretty decently, but do keep in mind that at that point you'll probably be losing a lot of pip momentum, considering that spells like Fuel or Naphtha Scarab are generally 2 pips, and you'll be using double the amount of pips to remove 1 if not 2 of them. And keep in mind that spells like Fuel and Naphtha Scarab put 3 traps at a time, so you already are losing that trap battle right away. And you also won't be able to do enough damage to make the Fire worry that you're going to, you know, have yourself do an open hit on them that could possibly kill them or put them in a critical situation. Okay, so what about a spell like Berry Surprise? Me personally, this is my least favorite spell. The reason why I don't necessarily like this spell is because it's extremely RNG oriented. The way this spell works is either you do damage or you get a heal. The only time you might be using this, if anything, is during critical situations where you and your opponent are at low health. So it's either, oh, you can get a pretty nice heal out of it and can get yourself right back into the game and barely survive, or you might be able to kill your opponent right then and there. And while I don't think this is terrible, I can see where they were going with this, where this is like a last resort type of spell, which I definitely do like for sure. It's definitely not necessarily what Storm needs in my opinion. Now, if you were to go by the 3 paths, because there are 3 paths in this one, the top path boosts both the damage and the healing. The middle path does a little bit of a buff. However, the main gimmick is that it raises the chance for the damage path to be the more than likely option to roll. The bottom path has it to where the healing option is more than likely to roll. So me personally, when it comes to this, it really just depends on your preference. If I were you, I would definitely go for the top path, only because in my opinion this spell is more of a last resort type of spell. This is kind of like an insane bolt, with the exception that it doesn't really have the potential to kill you, but it does have the potential to do a lot of damage to your opponent or give you the option to have a really good heal. So this spell, while it is my least favorite, it definitely is very interesting, and it kind of gives me the idea of how Insane Bolt should have been used, which is a spell that is meant to be used at last resort whenever you're either really close to killing your opponent and you're also really close to dying. And that's the part that I do like about the spell. Otherwise, me personally, it's not my favorite spell. And finally, let's talk about my most favorite spell in all the spells of this pack. And while I do think every single spell on this pack is very interesting, it doesn't seem to be extremely broken, but they do bring some pretty interesting elements to PvP. This one is the best one overall, because this one has so much potential on many means. So let's talk about it. Camp Bandit. What's so great about Camp Bandit? Well, Camp Bandit is a shift spell, but for traps. So the way this works, let's say for example, you decided to use a feint. The way this spell works is if the feint's the most recent trap that's on you, what it will do is it'll do a life damage. So like if there was like a life shield going on, then you can use this as a shield breaker plus a way to have a 70% trap go to the opponent and convert it to life damage, which is insane. Because now we're talking about not being able to feint against life anymore if they have access to the spell, because chances are they will use the spell against you, and now you have to deal with a 70% life trap, which is insane. It's really good for life wizards for sure. Now, what would I recommend if you were to go either top tier or the bottom path? If you go the top path or bottom path, the damage is the same. You'll have the same amount of damage going on. The main difference is that the top path will only keep the same effect it has currently, where it converts to life trap damage to the opponent. So that means if you were to have the spirit trap up on you as the most recent trap instead of a feint, it will probably take that spirit trap and put a 25% trap on the opponent. If it was a feint, then it will be a 70% life trap on the opponent. However, if you were to go the bottom path, and this in my opinion is probably the best path if you're going universal strat. So what I mean by universal strat is Nova, because they don't necessarily really use their school spells that much that are damage oriented, unless it's ones that can allow it to boost the effect on Nova. And the thing I really like about this spell, if you were to go the bottom path, is that you get a guaranteed 50% trap. So meaning, no matter what it is, it could be the spirit trap, it could be like, you know, a feint, it could be a curse, no matter what it is, it will be a guaranteed 50% trap on the opponent, which is really good for Nova players for sure. And now, with the spell, I can see the possibilities of Nova players rocking Life Mastery just to use the spell alone. And as for Life players, while it is a very situational spell, it could come in handy in some situations. And this basically will have it to where every single player who even dares decide to use feints on Life will probably think second, because now with this spell, Life has access to something that makes them, for the lack of a better term, somewhat immune to the idea of being feinted on, which is amazing. Now, for my final verdict on this pack, I do think that overall, it's a pretty mid pack. You know, there really isn't that much great going on it, with the exception of the new spells, and there's nothing wrong with the aesthetics, or like, you know, going for aesthetic packs rather than packs that are good for PvP or PvE. Me personally though, it's not my favorite aesthetic pack in quite a long time. And while there are some good things that this pack can drop, in fact I will name it to you right now. We have Turquoise you can get from this pack. You can get Sunions from this pack, which are good for the extraordinary TCs. You have Ivy Leagues, which is good for triage. Obviously, you get spell elements and TC of the new spells, which is the best thing this pack has to offer. You actually are able to get chemical salts, alchemical salts. However, I will say you only get one at a time, so definitely do not roll in this pack for those specific reagents. And you also get a new reagent known as Flax, which could be useful for the new world. And really, other than that, the biggest drawback that I have on this pack is, again, housing items that are not unique, music scrolls that come from Decaversity as well, along with pets that you could probably buy from vendors, or you could just get it through hatching very easily. Those are very common in this pack. So if you're into the aesthetics and you want the aesthetics, it's going to be somewhat difficult to get all the aesthetics. And if you're just going for the spells, do keep in mind you're probably going to be running into the issues of, oh, I'm just gonna get a bunch of music scrolls and some more useless stuff that I may not be able to use anytime in the future. And with that being said, I would say if you're not going for the spells, I will skip this pack, giving it a 2 out of 5. And I hope you guys did enjoy this pack review video. Hopefully it wasn't too long for you guys, because I did want to take the time to talk about the new spells and in my personal opinions that have the potential in PvP use. And the next time that I'll be making a video, I will be talking about the new spells that were implemented within Test Realm. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, because we're getting close to 1,000 subscribers. And as always, remember to stay frenzy. Peace.